Is magic permitted in the Bible? Today, we talk about the Egyptian context of the third and fourth commandment on this episode of Ancient Egypt and the Bible. Okay, in this series on the Ten Commandments, we have broken each episode down into segments of 2 commandments each. Today, we are going to discuss the third and fourth commandments. So let's get into it with the third commandment from Exodus 27. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. When we talk about the third commandment, most people think that this is a prohibition against, say, foul language or using the name of God as a swear. But that is really not quite the intention of this commandment. But the language is very arcane. So I think we need to break this down to some extent to sort of really get to, say, the core issue of what does the third commandment actually mean. Now, the language itself has some interesting nuances. Like, for example, the word for to take, as in to take the name of the Lord your God, actually means to lift up or carry, as in the sense of carrying a load or a heavy bag. And even the words in vain is not in a description of manner, but more of direction, as in towards vanity or to make it empty. So there is some linguistic stuff that doesn't quite make it into our translations that I think really affect the meaning here. But when we take this in its Egyptian context, again, we have to remember that the 10 Commandments were given to Israelites 3 months after they left Egypt. So culturally, contextually, historically, the newly formed Israelite nations are Egyptian in culture and in thought. And it's with that culture and thought that we have to sort of take these commandments in their context. Now, one of the features of ancient Egypt is that everyone in ancient Egypt believed in magic. Magic was everywhere in Egyptian culture. Everybody performed magic in ancient Egypt. Everything from love spells to heal someone sick to wards of protection. The whole culture was awash in magic. And one of the interesting features of Egyptian magic was a particular belief. And that belief was, if you knew the true name of God, you could use that name to manipulate the god, to make him do what you want. The idea was, in ancient Egypt, names had power. To know someone's true name was the ability to manipulate them. So when we have a commandment like this, where it says, do not carry the Lord your God's name towards vanity, it's really a warning that you cannot and should not attempt to use God's name in sort of these magical rites that attempted to manipulate God. In a sense, what this is a commandment asserting God's sovereignty. You cannot manipulate God to make him do what he doesn't want to do, which was part of the culture, religious culture of the ancient Near East. It was thought that, as I said, if you use a magic spell, you could manipulate a god to do exactly what you want him to do. But Yahweh isn't like that. Yahweh is utterly sovereign. There's nobody who can manipulate God. And this is a warning against even attempting it. Because it's chipping away at his sovereignty and his identity to even attempt it. Now, besides the prohibition on magic inferred by this commandment, there's another implication of this command, which is denigrating God by association. And what is meant by that? Well, this is actually saying that if you accept Yahweh as your God, how you behave reflects upon the reputation of God himself. Let's give you sort of an illustration. Let's say you start a McDonald's franchise, or any burger franchise. The parent corporation expects you to produce food and service that reflects favorably upon the name of the franchise. But let's say you were to throw dirt on the food, or leave the food out at room temperature for extended periods of time so customers get sick. And let's say you let the garbage overflow, you don't mop the floors, you keep the franchise in really bad order. This reflects unfavorably upon the name of the franchise. In the same way, when we say that Yahweh is our God, if our behavior reflects badly upon God, you are actually taking on the name of God in a casual manner. Becoming a Yahweh worshiper is an all or nothing proposition. There's no half committing to Yahweh. And this command really makes this explicit. So, you cannot just say, okay, I'm going to worship Yahweh, but yet my personal life is going to go to complete pot. I'm going to cheat on my wife, I'm going to cheat on my taxes, I'm going to pickpocket and shoplift whenever possible, I'm going to kick puppies on the street. Your behavior now really, really reflects upon the God you're worshiping. So if you make public statements that you worship Yahweh, your private life needs to reflect that also. Because it's not just you now. It's you plus your association to the God you claim. So when your behavior doesn't live up to the standards of the God you are claiming, then you are taking on the name of that God in a way that makes it empty. And unfortunately, much of the history of, say, Christianity is full of violating this commandment. So, I think this is a really, really important consideration to anyone who wants to convert to Christianity, is that it is an all or nothing proposition. Now, the last part of this verse is also very interesting, as it shows that those who besmirch the name of God will not be left unpunished. Quote, "For the Lord God will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain." End quote. Now, this is a very interesting New Testament connection. When Christ said in Matthew 12:31 that, quote, "Any sin and blasphemy will be forgiven men, but blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven," end quote. This is a direct allusion to the third commandment. The idea here is that since Christ became a man, sin and blasphemy directed towards him would be forgiven, but the Spirit falls under that rubric of the third commandment, so that those who blaspheme the Spirit fall under the same condemnation of those that would blaspheme the Father in accordance with the third commandment. So that's a very, very interesting New Testament connection here to the Sinai covenant. Okay, so that covers the third commandment. Now, let's move on to the fourth commandment. Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11. "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Now, the 4th commandment is a commandment that is created for mankind, not God. It is a kindness bestowed unto mankind in a way that is sort of hard for us to appreciate today. When the Israelites left Egypt, their work week was very, very different. The Egyptian work week is 10 days long, with only a half day off. So they didn't get a full day off in Egypt. Only a half day off. The month was divided into 3 weeks of 10 days. So this is a major cultural shift, going from a 10-day work week to a 7-day work week, where they now get a full day off. But this commandment goes beyond that, because it compares with God's creation in a very, very specific way. It states, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day." Now, in the last video, we talked a little bit about idolatry with the 2nd commandment, but we didn't discuss the phrase, quote, "in heaven above, or on the earth below, or in the water under the earth," end quote. This is an allusion to Israelite cosmology. The Israelites believed that there were 3 cosmological planes. They believed in a heavens, or sometimes a heavenly ocean that was above the earth. They also believed in the earth as we experience it and the sea. And they also believed that under the earth were waters, and that the earth was supported by pillars upon the waters. So this is referring to ancient Israelite cosmology. Now, in this command, God is saying that He created the heavens and the earth and all the life in them. So essentially, the totality of the corpus of creation. And then per the text reads, He rested from it. There's an idea here that there is a separation between creation and the God who created it. This is the idea of theological transcendence. And it is the watershed development for the concept of monotheism. And it is absolutely essential to monotheism. When the Israelites left Egypt, they carried with them concepts of polytheism, henotheism, localism, and pantheism. And now, 3 months out of coming out of that culture, that potpourri of religious ideology, they now are giving the idea that God creates and rests from that. This idea of theological transcendence has a way of taking henotheism and pantheism and collapsing them into monotheism. And that is perhaps the most important contribution that the 10 Commandments makes to the religion of Israel. Is it takes all that late Bronze Age milieu of ideas that they had of God and completely transforms them using a different metaphysics, that metaphysics of transcendence, God is not part of his creation. He's separate from his creation. And this has the consequence of producing monotheism. And this is the real importance of the first 4 commandments, is that it forces Israel to become monotheist, not by orthodoxy or right belief, but by orthopraxis. Orthopraxis means right doing or right practice. 10 commandments are essentially making the Israelites follow a right practice that ends up producing right thought. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something from today's video, and we'll see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.